Hello, I'm Ollie and this is Criminally, where I talk about crime, pulp, horror, that kind of thing. Today, everything I read in January. So, 22 books to talk to you about today, plus 2 DNFs. So, I don't often DNF books, or haven't done historically anyway. If you saw the video I put up a little while ago talking about how I want to make reading less stressful and more fun going forward, one of the things I said I was going to try and do in that is be more ruthless in my DNFing. And I have started that. So I did DNF 2 books in January. So let me start with those and then I'll get into the things I finished. So the 2 books I DNF'd were Robinson Crusoe by Daniel Defoe. So, an absolute classic. I started it and immediately I didn't get on with it. There was just something about the writing that I found really, really difficult to process. So yes, that one was a very, very swift DNF. The second one then was a book that I was listening to on an audiobook, which I did give a little bit longer than the Robinson Crusoe, and that was Paris, the Memoir by Paris Hilton. The audiobook was read, as you might expect, by Paris Hilton. And she just came across as quite annoying. I think celebrity memoirs, even of celebrities I don't particularly like, I often find quite fascinating if that person is sufficiently self-aware that they can reflect on the bad sides of their character and their families and things like that, as well as the more positives. And with this Paris Hilton book, and maybe I should have given it longer, maybe someone's going to say in the comments, it ends up being wonderfully self-reflective. It just didn't feel like it was going in that direction at all. It felt like Paris Hilton went into it with a very clear definition of who she was as a person, and that was all you were going to get from the book. So yes, I didn't enjoy that one and DNF'd it reasonably quickly. Right, let's get into the things I finished then. So the main event I was taking part in January was the Kindle Kobo clean-out event, which I co-hosted with a number of other great booktubers, which was focusing on reading books on your Kindle or Kobo that you just hadn't got round to, kind of as part of the Read What You Own challenge, so a spin-off from the Read What You Own challenge. So a lot of the books I'm going to talk about today are Kindle books, but there are some physical books as well. So the first book I finished then in the month was a wonderful Western that was sent to me a while ago by one of my patrons, Heidi. So this is, Western/mystery. So it's Written in Fire by William L. DeAndrea. This was really good. So a really enjoyable mystery set in the Old West, about 2 guys, one of whom is like an ex kind of sheriff and gunslinger and things like that, who's now in a wheelchair. The other is a writer, and they kind of team up to solve this mystery. It was just fun. It was just really, really well done. The mystery was decent. The Western kind of vibe was decent. I had a great time with it. Thoroughly recommended. Next, for the Kindle Clean-Out event, I read Commandos vs. Zombies, which is a kind of 3-issue omnibus of Commando comics. So have I got a Commando comic handy? Yes. So this is a Commando comics. These have been going in the UK for decades. Much loved by schoolboys everywhere. I certainly used to enjoy them when I was a schoolboy. So this Commandos vs. Zombies is a newer one they've done. So they do both reprints of older ones, and they do new stories as well. So this is, as the title suggests, Commandos, i.e. like British Special Forces in the Second World War, up against some zombies that had been created by the Nazis. So it was very, very silly. It was probably a bit too silly. It was very kind of, not necessarily over the top, but just implausible, and had plot holes and things like that. And it was fun, but I didn't love it. Okay, moving on then, again for the Kindle Kobo clean-out event, Malibu Burning by Lee Goldberg. So this was a really fun mystery. So I like Lee Goldberg a lot. He writes just entertaining, simple kind of mysteries and thrillers and things like that. This one was about a couple of guys who investigate like wildfires and things like that in California, going up against a criminal mastermind who's trying to pull off a heist. And it was just entertaining. It did get a bit too complicated towards the end, but generally speaking, I had a lot of fun with it. Next up, we have Man F This House by Brian Asman, which is a kind of haunted house story, which goes in an interesting direction. So it was good, but I didn't love it. It didn't quite grip me and convince me enough, but I did think it was an interesting story, and it's quite an enjoyable kind of quick read as well. After that, something very different, The Greatest Enemy by Douglas Reeman, which is a 70s naval adventure about a British warship off the coast of Thailand, I think it was, going up against like smugglers and things like that. It lost me a bit towards the end, but the thing that really impressed me about this book was the mix of very convincing kind of naval action and characters. So the two central characters, the captain of the ship and like the first officer, were both really interesting characters, and the kind of dynamic between them was very interesting to read as well. After that, for Kelsey from Slime and Slashers, Year of Laymon reading event, I read a Richard Laymon book, No Sanctuary. I didn't particularly enjoy this. I have very mixed feelings about Richard Laymon, as I always say on the channel, and sometimes I do enjoy his books. This one I didn't particularly enjoy. So, as is often the case in Richard Laymon books, you get two plots which have basically nothing to do with each other and then kind of get clumsily mashed together at the end. So one of the plots, which was quite interesting, was about this woman who breaks into people's houses when they're on holiday, just to kind of hang out basically and have a little holiday of her own. And she breaks into a like a psychopath's house. So that was one, and then the other one was about a couple who've gone camping who meet some kind of mysterious, unpleasant characters while they're camping. So it was kind of okay. It was a readable enough cheesy horror thriller, but it had all the problems that Richard Laymon books tend to have. After that then, a wonderfully enjoyable mystery that I read with Randy, one of my patrons, and also the host of the channel, Randy Ray, the literate Texan. So this was Death and the Conjuror by Tom Mead. A really fun, so modern book, but a throwback to kind of golden age locked room type mysteries, involving a pair of detectives investigating some deaths. So one of whom is a stage magician, and the other of whom is like a bobby. So that combination of the two of them worked really, really well, and it was just an intricately put together, really entertaining mystery. Had a great time with it. Next up, another buddy read with one of my patrons, this time with Leanna. So I read The Melting by Lize Spit. So I have done a review of this on the channel. A really, really disturbing book. So about some kids in Europe who play a game where they ask other kids in the town to answer a riddle, and if those other kids get it wrong, they have to pay a forfeit, and those forfeits become increasingly troubling as the book goes on, and it all builds up to this incredibly horrific climax. I really thought this was pretty good. I had a really, really, I don't want to say I had a good time with it because it's horrible at times, this book, but I was completely gripped by it, and I thought it was very, very effective. After that, something much lighter, a Mills and Boon Euromance, Haunting Alliance by Catherine George. So this is part of a series of books that were published to commemorate the formation of the European Union. This one is set in Portugal, so the books are all set in different countries in the EU. A fairly standard 90s category romance, but quite entertaining. I had fun with it anyway. Right, next then, continuing my ongoing read through of Patricia Highsmith's books that I'm doing with Anne from the channel and Novella. We read Ripley Underground, the second of the Ripleyad. So this was good. I enjoyed it. It's definitely not as good as the Talented Mr. Ripley, the first Ripley book, but it was a fun thriller. So Ripley in this one is involved in like this art scam, and it's gradually kind of unravelling for various reasons. It's about him trying to keep it all together. So it's got, that kind of American in Europe thing, which is a real trope of Highsmith, which is always fun to read. Ripley is a great character. Lots of kind of period globe trotting. So he kind of travels around Europe in it, using traveller's checks and going to American Express offices and things like that. Just really fun. I had a really, really good time with it, and I'm really looking forward to the new Ripley series on Netflix, which I think has just been launched. So yeah, that looks fantastic. So very much looking forward to watching that and seeing if they do a good job of bringing Ripley to the screen. Right, after that then, My Darkest Prayer by S.A. Cosby. I really like S.A. Cosby, as I always say when I talk about his books. So he's just a fantastic crime writer. This was his first crime novel. And it was good. It wasn't, I don't think it's quite as good, quite as polished as his more recent stuff, but it was really, really entertaining. So about a guy who works in a funeral parlour who gets asked by some women who attend a local church to investigate the murder of the preacher of the church. And it ends up being this big kind of small town scandal type story. It was really entertaining. I really had a good time with it. Next up, The Forgetting Moon by Brian Lee Durfee. A huge 750-page fantasy epic, not the kind of thing I normally read, but this was great fun. So just a nice mix of kind of coming-of-age story, political intrigue, lots of action in there, like battles and like excellent fight scenes, like gladiatorial type fight scenes and things like that. A bit of magic, so a few kind of magical creatures and things like that thrown in. Just really solid, entertaining storytelling. Speaking of good storytellers, after that we have my favourite storyteller of them all, Ed McBain, real name Evan Hunter. So this was a book published under yet another name, so it was originally published under the name Ezra Hannon. The book is called Doors. So this is about a burglar, kind of just living his life basically. So it does kind of build up to a particular job towards the end of the book. But more than that, it's just about his day-to-day life, about his relationships, about his background, about how he came to be a burglar and things like that. It was just a very, very interesting character study. Really, really well done. Not the kind of thing I associate with McBain, who I tend to think of as being more of a plot-driven author. But I thought this was excellent. I really did. After that, another book by my favourite author, this time Stephen King. So I read book 6 in the Dark Tower series, The Song of Susanna. I like this a lot more than book 5, which I didn't enjoy too much. This was just good. It's really action-packed. It's got that thing of people travelling between different worlds and things like that, which I always enjoy in fiction. Just a really, really good entry in the series. I did think it went off the boil a bit towards the end, but definitely interested to see how the series wraps up in book 7, which I should be reading fairly soon. Next then, a book by a friend of Stephen King's, Peter Straub. So the Hellfire Club. So this was our group read for my patrons this month. I overall like this. I think other people in the group read haven't had as good a time with it. It's really, really long. It's much longer than it needed to be. But it's interesting. So it's about a woman who works for a publisher's that is owned by her husband's family. The publishing house its success is particularly down to one particular author and indeed one particular book. And it's about the backstory of how that book came to be written. But there's also like a serial killer operating in the town that this woman lives in. So that all gets wrapped into the plot as well. So there's a load of different things going on in this book. A lot of different threads, which felt like they were all over the place, to be honest with you, for a lot of the book. But I did think Peter Straub managed to put it all together at the end. I thought it was good, but as I say, not everyone who read it had quite as positive opinion of it as I did. After that, Every Dead Thing by John Connolly, which again I think is too long. And again, like the Laymon book, kind of has two plots mashed together. So this is the first in the Charlie Parker mystery series of books, and has Charlie Parker, the detective, investigating a new mystery, but also investigating the murder of his wife and daughter. And those two things ended up, I think, being quite uncomfortably mixed together. I would much have preferred it if it had been two completely separate books. I thought both the mysteries on their own were pretty good, but bundling them together just felt like too much. It got complicated, it got a bit confusing, there were loads of characters to keep track of. I'll definitely read more books in the series because I think Charlie Parker as a character is great, and I think John Connolly, other things I read by John Connolly I've really, really liked. But this was kind of middling for me, I think. After that, something shorter and really fun, The Final Continent by D.C. McManus, with illustrations by Simon Bisley. So this is a post-apocalyptic, very pulpy adventure, but a modern one, a new book that came out in the last few years. Just pure fun. This guy with lots of sort of cybernetic enhancements and things like that, going to Antarctica, fighting polar bears, fighting like other people there, like other mutants and things like that, all sorts of stuff going on. So just action-packed, tongue definitely in cheek, lots of black humour. I really, really enjoyed it. After that, a book I didn't enjoy quite so much, The Night House by Joe Nesbo. So this is a book that starts off really, really fun. It starts off feeling like a Goosebumps book. It's very entertaining, about this kid who his friends or people around him keep dying in really weird, creepy ways. And about him trying to figure out what's going on. And as the book progresses, things get more and more complicated. There's more and more layers to it. And it just ended up being a bit annoying, if I'm honest. Yeah, I didn't have a good time with that in the end. After that, a book I enjoyed a lot more, Population 1280 by Jim Thompson. So I have done a review of this on the channel. A really solid crime novel with a bit extra on top, basically. So about this shady sheriff in a small southern town around the time of the First World War, he's like completely corrupt, completely lazy, and it's just about his life. And things gradually escalating as the various schemes and things like that he's been involved in start becoming problematic, shall we say. So I thought it was a really excellent book, and the ending in particular is one of those endings that just really left me thinking. And then finally, oh no, not quite finally, almost finally. So finally, for my Read What You Own challenge at least, so the 100th book in my Read What You Own challenge was this, The Survivalist, Book 12, The Rebellion by Jerry Ahern. Another book in the Survivalist series, which is a very silly post-apocalyptic series from the 80s. It was fun, but it wasn't as good as some of the other books in the series. So finally then, truly finally, the last book I read was a fantastic book. So this was Maynard's House by Herman Raucher, which I read for Kelsey from the channel Simon Slashers. It was her book club pick for this month. This was great, and I think, well, I am going to be doing, and it will probably have been up by the time this video goes up, a live stream with Kelsey and Andrew from the channel that came from the page. So do check that out if you want to hear more thoughts on this book. But it was just great. So a 70s kind of haunted house, kind of folk horror story about a guy who's come back from Vietnam, and a buddy of his in Vietnam who's died has left him this house. And there's weird stuff going on at the house, basically. It was just so well written. One of the best written books I've read in a while, I think. I really did think the writing was fantastic, quite subtle, and gradually ekes more, kind of wrings more and more out of this concept, and goes into some really, really interesting directions as well. So I really did think that was an excellent book. So I hope you all had good reading months in January. Do let me know in the comments your favourite reads of the month. Let me know if you've read any of the books I talked about and what you thought of them. And as always, thanks very much for watching. Hope you're safe and well out there. Hope you're really good stuff. And I'll speak to you again very soon. Cheerio.